These are the two most epic deaths in human history. Number 1, the death of Ben Salomon. This is the story of a dentist who became a field medic and killed 98 enemy soldiers before finally dying. Salomon was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1940, 3 years after graduating from USC Dental School. Salomon was an excellent soldier and was very good with both a rifle and a pistol. He was quickly promoted, becoming a lieutenant and then a captain in 1944. He served as the regimental dental officer for the 105th Infantry Regiment. In June 1944, Salomon and the 105th were sent into active combat in Saipan. Fighting in the Pacific was known for being very bloody. Many soldiers were badly hurt. Even the battalion's field surgeon was seriously injured, so Salomon offered to replace the injured surgeon. By July, both the Americans and Japanese had lost many men. Although the Japanese still had 4,000 soldiers left on the island, they knew they couldn't win. So they made a final decision for a banzai charge, a mission aimed only at killing as many American soldiers as possible, with no plan to survive or retreat. Early in the morning of July 7, 1944, the remaining 4,000 Japanese soldiers launched their last attack. Salomon's field tent was just 50 yards behind the front foxholes, and within minutes, the tent was filled up with over 30 wounded soldiers. He worked hard to care for the wounded, but soon the Japanese broke through the front lines. When he looked outside his tent, he saw a Japanese soldier stabbing a wounded American lying on the ground. Angry, Salomon grabbed a rifle from one of his patients, shot the Japanese soldier, and killed him. Seeing the situation really getting worse, Salomon told the other medics to evacuate the wounded soldiers and that he would stay behind to cover them as they escaped. Salomon then picked up a rifle and went to the front lines. He saw 4 men manning a machine gun fall to enemy fire. He rushed to the machine gun and manned it himself, firing into the charging Japanese soldiers. He continued to fight from that position until he was eventually overrun by enemy soldiers. Days later, when the Americans returned to the battlefield, Salomon's body was found slumped over the machine gun, with about 98 dead Japanese soldiers piled in front of him. Salomon's body had about 76 bullet holes and many bayonet wounds, 24 of which he might have obtained even before dying. Blood on the ground showed that, even while badly injured, Salomon had repositioned the machine gun several times. Even though he had saved many lives that day, he was not given a Medal of Honor because of the Geneva Convention rule, which said that medical officers were not allowed to bear arms against an enemy. For many years, many generals recommended him for the Medal of Honor. Salomon was mostly forgotten in history. But in 2002, President George Bush finally gave him the Medal of Honor. That's 58 years after his death. Totally deserved. The second most epic death is the story of the greatest wingman in human history. It's a dark night in 12th century Japan, and a Buddhist monk named Benkei is walking through the streets of Kyoto. Now Kyoto is full of temples, so monks are a normal sight, but Benkei is not like other monks. At 6 feet 6 inches, he is much taller than everyone around him, and he is carrying a weapon that looks like a mix between a sword and a long spear called a naginata. His face looked more like someone on a hunt than someone searching for inner peace. That night, Benkei was hunting for his last victim. You see, Benkei was actually a Sohei, a trained battle-hardened warrior monk. He had encountered many samurais and hated them. He felt they were a very arrogant class, unworthy of their status in society. The world would be a better place with less of them around, and this led him on his bloody quest to duel and defeat 1,000 samurai, collecting their swords as trophies after each victory. By this time, Benkei had collected 999 swords and was out that night looking for a final opponent. Near Goto Tenjin Shrine, he heard the sound of a flute. When he looked to see who was playing, he saw a small, thin samurai. Around this samurai's waist was a beautiful, gilded katana perfect to complete Benkei's sword collection. Benkei quickly challenged the samurai to a duel. The small man put away his flute and, to Benkei's surprise, agreed to fight. The two walked to Gojo Bridge and drew their weapons. Feeling confident, Benkei charged in, but even though he was way taller than the samurai, Benkei was quickly defeated. The samurai didn't kill him, but simply walked away. Benkei was shocked and couldn't believe what had happened. In the days that followed, his shock turned into anger and frustration. Wondering how he lost to a small samurai, he had beaten much bigger men before. Determined to get revenge, he waited at the temple, hoping to see the samurai again. Eventually, the samurai returned, and Benkei challenged him to another duel. And once again, Benkei lost. Ashamed, he bowed and admitted defeat. He told the samurai that he would give up his life as a monk and follow him as a loyal retainer. The samurai, who was Minamoto no Yoshitsune of the legendary Minamoto clan, accepted. Benkei joined Yoshitsune on his adventures, and the two become inseparable. They fight side by side in the different wars, but when Yoshitsune's half-brother, Yoritamo, becomes shogun, jealousy and mistrust grow between the brothers. Soon, Yoshitsune and Benkei are on the run, being hunted by Yoritamo and his soldiers. They find shelter with another clan, the Fujiwara, and live in peace for a few years under their protection. This peace didn't last. With pressure and likely bribes from Yoritamo, the Fujiwara finally betray Yoshitsune. Fujiwara, who once protected them, turned against them, and on June 15, 1189, at the Battle of Koramagawa, Yoshitsune and Benkei are surrounded and outnumbered with 500 of Fujiwara's men attacking their castle. The battle began, and Yoshitsune's men fought bravely, and Benkei is unstoppable on the battlefield, cutting down enemies who were much smaller than him. But even with their strength, Yoshitsune's men start to fall. With only a few retainers left, Yoshitsune knows the battle is lost. Yoshitsune turned to Benkei and says he plans to commit seppuku inside the castle. He needed time to prepare, and Benkei understands what he must do. He walked to the bridge, the only way into the castle, and stands alone against the Fujiwara army. Fujiwara then orders his men to charge, but wave after wave, Benkei cuts them down one after the other. No one could get past. Some stories say Benkei killed 300 soldiers by himself on that bridge. He stood tall behind a pile of fallen warriors, daring more men to come. But none of Fujiwara's soldiers want to face him. They all knew stepping onto the bridge meant certain death. Seeing his men too scared to attack, Fujiwara calls for his archer. The archers fire a volley of arrows, hitting Benkei in the chest, but he still doesn't move. They fire again, and still nothing changes. Benkei's body is now full of arrows, but he remains standing, blocking the way. They all stare at him across the bridge, too afraid to act. Finally, Fujiwara orders some of his men to move in. They slowly approach, and when they reach Benkei, they realize he was already dead. Even in death, Benkei stood tall, leaning on his spear for support. Benkei had planned his final stand to buy as much time as possible for Yoshitsune. By staying upright and showing no pain, he made it seem like he was ready to keep fighting. And because of his sacrifice, Yoshitsune had enough time to complete the seppuku ritual and kept his honor. Like and subscribe.